Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Deb from DG Reads, and it's time for my next installment in the Connections Reading Challenge. If you haven't caught the first two installments in this challenge, I will of course have them linked for you, but I can also do a little bit of a catch-up. This is a summer reading challenge brought to us by the folks at the 52 Book Club. They do an annual reading challenge where I use their 52 prompts of the year as prompts for my Prompt Ball TBR game, which is basically a gumball machine filled with reading prompts. And when I saw they had a summer challenge, I had to check it out, and it looked like so much fun, so I had to join in. This is one where you can't really plan too far ahead, so that has a lot of spontaneity to it, which is not something I always do. I love planning TBRs, but I'm trying to live in the moment with this one as much as possible and not think too many steps ahead. This challenge is kind of like a scavenger hunt style to pick your books. I started with My Friends by Frederick Bachman. My second book, I had to find one with a same word in the title, and then each prompt from there, you pick your next book based on something from your previous book. And it's been a ton of fun picking books. I've had a lot of wins. I've had some definite flops. So it's been an uphill, downhill roller coaster ride, perfect for summer. Where we left off at the end of the last episode, I had just finished a book from Macmillan Audio, and the next prompt was to read another book from the same publisher. So I went ahead and I picked The Man Made of Smoke by Alex North. I have a copy here from Book of the Month that I picked up, but I do have a gifted audiobook copy from Macmillan Audio as well. And I am now at the halfway point in this one, so we're ready to give you some initial thoughts in this one. As the book opens, we're following Dan, and he's in a rest stop bathroom. Something really creepy happens, and it is an encounter with this serial killer, this child kidnapper, and the kidnapper has somebody else, not him, but he sees them. This is very traumatizing. He winds up leaving home, leaving the kind of isolated place where he grew up, and doesn't really look back. He still has his father there. He's still in communication with his father, but he pretty much tries to keep himself kind of out of that realm. And he's a forensic psychologist working with serial killers who are in prison. He's got a lot on his plate. And then he gets a call that his father has gone missing, and it's assumed his father jumped off a cliff and committed suicide. And he didn't see this coming. He doesn't know why his father might have done this, but he goes home to investigate and figure out what's been going on. It turns out his father had witnessed something that's, I don't think in the synopsis, so I won't go into detail, but his father was investigating something, and so now Dan's kind of following in his father's footsteps to try to figure out what he was doing, what may have happened, and so forth. This is an isolated island setting. I seem to be hitting a lot of island books this year, and I think the setting itself has a very kind of gloomy, overcast feel to it. It has some atmosphere that I really appreciate. The fact that it's very gloomy and overcast here in Southern California today is matching up quite well with this. I think the mystery element has me very interested, and we're getting kind of a dual narrative because we're following his father and we're following him. And we see his father investigating, and then we see the son following in his footsteps. I will say it's a little on the slow side. It's definitely a slow burn type of mystery build, but it's working for me at the moment, so I'm not going to complain too much about that. And I'm interested to see where it's going in the second half. So I will check back in with you once I have some final thoughts. This particular installment, I already know, is going to be 4 books long, and there's a reason for that, because at the end of the video I am going to need to ask for some assistance, and there's something about the prompts that I do need help with. So stick around. This will be on the shorter side, I think. The other videos so far, I think I've done a few more books, 1 or 2 more books. So I think this will be relatively a quick one, but I'm looking forward to seeing where the trajectory takes me. It is now Monday. I had a busy weekend and also not that busy of a weekend, but I went to a book event for Olivia Blake's kind of launch of her new upcoming release book, Girl Dinner, which comes out in October. I'm super excited to get into it, and I did get an art copy as part of this event, so I have it to dive into, but that unfortunately doesn't fit our needs for this Connections Challenge. But en route to said event, I did get to finish my book. The Man Made of Smoke continued to be really engaging, to have my interest. I think it was really well done with the dual timelines of what was happening in the past, what was happening in the present. There are things in here that if you've read it, you would know, that I can't really say because it would be spoilery, but there are reasons why this worked really well for a Connections Challenge. And I think it hit for me on a lot of good levels. It did remain a very slow burn. It's not a a big thriller in my head. It's definitely more mystery, more procedural, what this main character is looking into, what his father in the past was looking into, and how those storylines kept kind of mimicking each other in some ways. So I'm giving this a solid 4-star. I really did enjoy it, but I think going in with the correct expectations for a slower book, for a slower mystery, with some really interesting twists and turns along the way, and is the right way to go into this one. So we're starting out with a success. Let's hope we continue on with that. The next prompt is one that I'm going to have to take a little bit to think about, because it's to read a nonfiction that in some way links back to this book. And I don't have quite as many options just sitting around for nonfiction. I have quite a few, but it's just very limited compared to my fiction assortment. So since I am trying to focus on books I own, I need to put some thought into what I could link back to this one. I have several fiction books that I'm thinking of that would absolutely link to this one. I just put 2 with missing fathers on the Magical Readathon TBR I just filmed over the weekend. So I'm sure I'll come up with something. I'm thinking about the fact that our main character in here is a psychologist, that he's studying serial killers, something related to mental health or psychiatry or something along those lines might work. And I tend to have some mental health rep type nonfiction on my shelves. I need to look through what I have. So I will be back once I figured out what that book is going to be and with some thoughts. Nonfiction, I don't always do kind of midway thoughts just because I find I'm absorbed in taking in the information, not so much having midway thoughts that are different from ending thoughts. So we'll see how it goes, but I will be back once I have an update for you. Hello, Connections vlog. It's been a while. I know for you it has not, but for me it has been a little bit. Took me a bit to figure out what my next book was going to be, and then a bit longer to hope that the audiobook would come through for it, because I do tend to prefer consuming nonfiction on audio, and thankfully my book did come through for me. As kind of expected, I did go ahead and binge through the whole thing yesterday, so I am here with final thoughts. The book I decided to pick up based on a connection to the previous book is Project Mind Control, Sidney Gottlieb, the CIA, and the Tragedy of MK Ultra. And this is by John Liesel, and I received a gifted copy of this from St. Martin's Press. It just came out in May, so it's one I've been wanting to get to. And I figured having mind in the title linked back to us having a psychologist type character in my previous book, and with the CIA, there's some criminal elements certainly going on in here that link to the book as well. This one was an interesting read. I didn't love it, but I thought it was really interesting. It had a lot of really good information. I think it really is making a point more about the CIA and the powers that they have and the kind of lack of checks and balances that have existed for the CIA over the years, more than just focusing in on mind control, where mind control is really kind of the clickbait that they're using to get into that. Because we get into things like the CIA doing assassinations, we get into things like the CIA using torture to get information out of terrorists, even though that doesn't really prove very effective. But the mind control portions were definitely interesting as well. The way they use drugs like LSD on people with and without telling them, used prisoners to conduct experiments on. There was a lot of interesting information, and I think the author did get their point across quite well, that the CIA has done a lot of wild things without any real oversight, and that inquiries into that haven't necessarily gone as deep as they maybe should have. So overall, I thought this was an interesting read. I'm giving it a 4-star. It's not a new favorite nonfiction, but I think if you're interested in the topic, I think this is a decent book to pick up. I do wish it maybe focused in a little bit more or had a little bit more maybe commentary. They do include a lot of the kind of documents as you're reading them. It has a lot of redacted sections, which is obviously understandable because that's the way the government works. There are, in the hard copy, a lot of kind of references to where information came from, so that's always interesting to be able to see. And there are some images also in the hard copy. There's photos of the different people they're talking about. Some of the news and documents and so forth are in here as well, which is interesting to flip through as you are reading as well. And you can kind of see a lot of the redacting that was done in these things that do make it hard to pull information out of. So anyway, this this was a good time, and I did read it really quickly. It's only like 300 pages, so it's not a huge time investment. If you get rid of actually the after materials, it's only 225 pages. So it is pretty short. And with that, it's time for my next prompt. And the next prompt is to find a book cover that's on the opposite side of the color wheel. And white's not necessarily on a lot of color wheels, but I decided the opposite of white is black, right? Right. So that's how I'm going to go with that. This is a little bit of a creamy white, but white enough. So with that, I decided I'm doing myself a favor. I have a book that I am going to be playing some Libby Chicken with. My audiobook goes back in 2 days, so I really need to pick it up. And it's officially on my TBR for this month, which means I really need to read it because I'm filming my TBR this weekend. And I want to be able to say I was successful. So the book I'm going to be picking up is The 13th Child by Erin A. Craig. I don't remember a whole lot about this one. It is the Barnes & Noble edition with the gilded edges. I'm assuming that's a Barnes & Noble feature. If it's on the main one, maybe as well, I don't know. But this one's primarily black cover. It has a main character whose godfather is deaf, from what I recall. I don't really remember too much about it, but this is an author who I remember having really good atmospheric writing and enjoying before when I read House of Salt and Sorrows. So I have been looking forward to picking this one up, and I'm finally glad to be doing so. So once I get into it, I'll be back with some initial thoughts. It's been maybe 24 hours since last I updated you. I don't actually remember, but I have made my way to the halfway mark in The 13th Child, and I'm really, really liking this. I think it has the kind of atmospheric sense of what I remember from Erin A. Craig's writing, and it's a really interesting premise. We start out with Hazel, and she's a 13th child, meaning she has 12 older siblings. Her parents did not want her, and they essentially are ready to give her away when she's born, or let her die. Those are kind of their options. The god of death decides to step in and save her and basically leave her with her parents to take care of her, but he'll come back someday and take her away. And she's therefore raised as think Cinderella, as the stepdaughter, being treated as the one who does all the nastiest chores. She gets forgotten. She gets less food. She gets less attention. Nobody wants her there, and they continuously tell her that. She's not under any illusion that her parents love her. She keeps waiting year after year for her godfather, Death, to come back for her. And finally, he does when she's 12. And he takes her away and tells her he's going to make her into a healer. And she needs to learn everything possible about the body and about medicine and everything else, and that's going to be her skill that she's going to put to use. She has a magical ability tied to this, but she needs to use actual medicine to help people. The ability she has is that in touching people, she can see what's wrong with them, she can see what cure they need, and she can see if they're not curable. And she is able to put this to use in a lot of fantastic ways, but there are costs to this. There are times she has to use her gift in what she feels is a bad way, and there are repercussions, let's say, from that. I did not expect going into this that it would be a ghost story, but it definitely has those gothic ghost feels to it, and there are some interesting dynamics. We do follow Hazel through various iterations. We see her with her family. We see her on her own as she's learning everything she needs to learn. We see her form a relationship and some of the consequences that get tied to that. And then we're seeing her now more so out in the open world, encountering new people with different power dynamics. And I think there's just a lot of really interesting things going on in here. And the dark nature to this, the gothic nature to this is really working well for me. So I'm going to keep going on this one. I don't think I had mentioned it, but this one also finishes off my horror bingo card, which is something that also really excites me to be able to kind of tick off that I did indeed finish it before fall rolls around again. So this is going really well. I have finished up The 13th Child, and this was a fantastic read. I think it did really well, especially for something that's YA, to go into some dark directions, to have some serious consequences, to have some romantic entanglements that go interesting ways. And I'm trying to be vague because, of course, at this point, anything plot related is spoilery. But I think this had a very dark atmosphere. We're dealing with things like plagues and like serious illnesses and the potential loss of life and children losing parents and parents losing children. And there are a lot of those types of things going on in here. I think the magic system, the sense of our main character being a healer with special gifts granted to her by the gods, and that was really well done also because there were consequences, which is what I like in a magic system. I don't want someone to just be able to heal whoever they want. There are limits to that. There are ways that she can make decisions, maybe to skirt the rules a bit, but that then creates other consequences. And I think the atmosphere in here was excellent. I liked how things resolved in the end. I liked the way the book wrapped up, and just the concept of these godparents actually being gods, and that being kind of a known thing in this world, that she wasn't the only one who has a godfather and hers just happens to be death. It's that certain gods do take on these godchildren. And overall, Erin A. Craig is definitely an author that I'm going to be watching for more from in the future. I'm really, really glad that I picked this up. It wasn't necessarily a perfect read for me, but it was very high up there. So I'm giving this one a 4.5 stars. And yeah, I think that's about it on this one. So the next prompt is to have a character share a profession with a character in this book. Now with fantasy, that's a little harder, but I think with her being a healer, I'm going to be looking for a book with a healer or a doctor or a surgeon. She does do some surgery in here. I was a little worried at the beginning of the book where she was basically just a house servant, that was going to be the profession I would have to figure out, or child was going to have to be her profession. But healer, I think, is definitely the one to go for. So I don't know what that's going to be yet. I don't know if I'm in a thriller mood, which is where I think I probably would have more options for doctors and surgeons. I can think of at least one book on my shelves that would work for that. I'm not sure what fantasies I have that have healers in them, but I will figure it out and let you know once I've started reading something. After looking through my shelves and seeing what I could find that related to a healer, I found a book with a doctor and a nurse. So I think that definitely works. And it is The Perfect Child by Lucinda Berry. This is one that I have on Kindle Unlimited. So I don't have a physical copy, but I am roughly 45% of the way into it now. This does have quite a bit of triggering content for our characters and potentially for readers as well. Some of it is hard to read about, even as someone who doesn't generally have a lot of trigger issues in reading, but this begins with a little girl who has been found wearing a diaper. She's assumed to be a toddler, and she's bloody. She's obviously in really rough shape. She's very, very emaciated and in need of a lot of medical attention. She's found wandering a parking lot next to a trailer park, and she's taken to the hospital by the police. Police are looking into who she is, where she came from, trying to find who put her in this condition. But in the meantime, she needs, like I said, a lot of medical attention. She's been starving. They have to slowly introduce food back to her. They need to give her surgery. She's had broken bones that haven't healed right. Our doctor character is Christopher, and the nurse is Hannah, and they are husband and wife who have really, really wanted to have a family of their own. And they've been infertile. They haven't been able to carry a pregnancy even after IVF and a bunch of other attempts. And this puts them in a position of really feeling for this little girl, and they quickly bond with her. They eventually, we know from the very beginning of the book, take her home. We are reading from Christopher's perspective, we are reading from Hannah's perspective, and there's also a perspective at the very beginning of the book and then throughout of the social worker. And we know from the social worker's POV, she's being interviewed by police because obviously something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. This little girl bonds with Christopher in particular quite quickly. She is very resistant to Hannah, but Hannah and Christopher both understand she's been severely, severely abused, and this is going to be something very different from bringing home a quote-unquote normal child. And Hannah is struggling with the way this little girl is not interacting with her, but also on some level understanding it. It turns out the little girl is 6 years old, so she's not a baby, but also she's very much still having tantrums. She's still very resistant to talk about certain things like where she came from, who hurt her, and all of this. We get glimpses through the police and the social worker's POV of the setting she had come from, the background, the potential dangers from that may still linger. And all of this is really interesting to read about. Like I said, it's a little difficult to read about at times, but I'm very curious where this is going to go. I'm assuming with a title like The Perfect Child, there's going to be things linking back to the little girl, not necessarily necessarily being so perfect, but I really have no idea what direction this is going to take. It's a pretty quick read. I want to say it's about an 8-hour audio. And so I've listened on my commute yesterday. I'm planning to listen to more today and see where we go with it. Like I said, I'm about 44% of the way in, and so far I am liking it, but would be very hesitant to recommend it to too many people without heavy trigger warnings. So with that, I'm going to continue on and see how the rest of it goes. I finished up A Perfect Child, and I am struggling to figure out my thoughts on this one, which is a problem given my next prompt. So this one hit on a lot of trigger warnings, and I feel like they're a little bit spoilery, but I feel like I need to say a couple of them. So if you don't want to hear anything about the trigger warnings in here at all, I'm going to put my hand up and just say a few things. And when I put my hand down, we're back into safe zone. So in this one, there is a pregnancy, and you get a lot of pregnancy focused content. There's a rather traumatic birth scene. There is baby endangerment. There is animal cruelty. There is animal death. So all of these are triggering things, and not things I particularly want to read about. They're not necessarily triggers for me, but not really things I'm looking for in my book. Okay, so those things aside, which are not things I look for in books and really want to focus on in books, I would not consider them particular triggers for me per se, but they're definitely things that I don't want to prioritize. All that said, I think the mental health rep in here was well done. I know Lucinda Berry has a background in mental health and in child abuse services or research or something along those lines. I remember reading about that because I did look her up with all of the kind of therapist focused books I've been reading from her. And I think all of that was really well done. It's very gritty. It's very intense in that regard. And I love the mental health aspect to it. Maybe less so the child involvement aspect, if that makes sense. There is very much a vibe in here of our female main character, Hannah, not being a reliable narrator, less so for the reader than for the people around her, for her husband, for the social worker, and not being taken seriously about how dangerous this child is becoming. The twists as to how far the child goes were painful to read about. There is a lot of grief going on in here. There's a lot that our characters get put through. I do think there were some really interesting discussions and definitely necessary discussions about the failures of our children's systems and the overwhelming number of complaints they get, calls they get, and just the lack of resources that go towards protecting children. And that definitely is prevalent in this book as well. So in the end, things I liked. The mental health rep I think was really well done. I think the messaging was on point. I think that the writing was really well done. I think the characters were well built out. I think that's tied to the mental health rep as well. What didn't so much work well for me is motherhood as a focus of horror thrillers is not my number one priority. I'd rather read about other things, and I'm always wary when it comes to there being animals involved in this type of story because I want animals to come out okay at the end of the book. And yeah, I'll leave that there. So this is a hard review, I think, for the next prompt, because this is the point where I need to ask you for help, because my next prompt is to read a book recommended to me based on my review of this book. So this book is winding up at a 3.5 to a 4-star for me. And that is largely because I think it was well written. I think it was well done. My enjoyment level probably brought it down a little bit, if anything. That's why it's on the low end of a 4 or a 3.5. The characters and everything else was really well done. It definitely was gripping. I needed to know what was happening next. But I think what I'm looking for is something like that, but maybe not focused on children or not focused on motherhood or the process of having children. And yeah, I don't know. So with all of that, can you think of any books that you would recommend to me that I pick up as my next book? Please let me know in the comments below. I'm going to put this review out in a few places to try to get some different recommendations, but I would love to hear your thoughts. But with that, I am going to wrap this up here because it's going to take me a bit to collect some recommendations and figure out what I'm reading next for my next prompt and my next vlog. Let me know in the comments below if you have any recommendations. Have you read any of these books? And if you've made it this far and you don't have anything to comment, leave me a balloon emoji for the Perfect Child cover. If you could hit that like button below, I would surely appreciate it. And subscribe if you're interested in more of my Connections reading challenge, more of my book reviews, and more of my bookish content in general. But for now, I'll leave you here and see you real soon in a new video.